I'm just gonna start off by introducing myself. My name is Angel Martinez. I'm one of the founders of the organization. This organization came together by a conversation Vanessa and I had. And I've worked in music all my life, I would say at this point, because I'm going on 20 years. And she brought to my attention that within the space where she works, there's a lack of Latinos and people of color. But to me, it was a surprise because I've worked in groups and labels where I've never experienced that. So when she said there's really no Latinos in my department, I'm like, bro, there's mad Latinos in this building. Like, I can't even connect with what you're telling me right now. But my lack of awareness brought me to the fact that, yes, this is happening. So we formed this organization, Vanessa, myself, Michelle, to bring awareness to our community. And by I say our community, I mean everyone of color, focused more on Latinos and us understanding what we work with and what we have to work with and what we've been through our career paths. Just being Latinos working in an English space or vice versa. So we started the first panel with an A&R panel, which was incredible. That one was, I think we were extremely happy with the turnout. Everyone was very, very informative. Riggs was one of the lead A&Rs on that panel discussing everything that he's been through and his ups and downs. And then we pivoted, and I think I spoke on this earlier, due to the whole COVID situation and having to do these viral Zoom calls, but still being effective and bringing awareness. So after that, we did the marketing one. That was about 2 months ago, right, Vanessa? Yeah, you're nodding your head. Thank you. And then it brought us to this film, TV conversation, because to your point, it's been a loaded situation where we haven't gotten the roles due to color. We haven't been recognized or given the attention or awareness because of our color or because we're Latin. So I want to thank everyone for joining. Vanessa, founder, Michelle, also a founder, A-Rod, Kathleen, I'm going to pronounce it wrong, who's always helping. Kathleen. I'm just going to say it in Spanish. And Gabby, who have killed it on social media, and they've been extremely helpful with making sure that we pull these things through. Because within our busy schedules, they always manage to hit us and say, yo, I got this new idea for us to start posting, and our socials have been going crazy since then. So definitely thank you guys for joining and participating and being a part of this conversation and bringing your knowledge and your expertise for other people to pay attention to and feel like they have a possibility and an opportunity of getting there. You know, I think that's always the goal, is like, how am I going to get there? But if you hear other people's experiences, you might carry a similar path and not feel like you're stuck. So I'm going to let Jenny, who's the best host in the world, take over.
Thank you, Angel. Welcome, everyone. As he mentioned, this is the Industry in Spanglish TV, film, and media panel. I am so excited for this conversation. When you think of these fields, it's ever evolving and the landscape is constantly changing, but the creatives that work in these fields are very highly informed creatives, right? They translate knowledge to certain demographics and to the population and to the world, right? And develop critical thinking. And I am extremely excited to dig in and listen to each panelist here. They're all amazing human beings, and somehow we've all been connected. And I'm extremely excited again to like hear more about their unique journeys. So right now, Ashley Soto is not here with us, but she will join us a little later on. I'm going to ask each panelist to present themselves and tell us. Oh, you are here. Hi, Ash.
Hi, sorry. I'm a bootleg, so I'm here, but I'm gonna be muting and unmuting myself. Sorry.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, sorry. So I'm gonna ask each panelist to present themselves and tell us a little bit about their current role and their day-to-day.
All right, I'll start. So my name is Kennedy Medina. I'm the Program Planning and Strategy Manager for the Nickelodeon sister networks, which are Nicktoons and T-Nick. What my role is, I manage the day-to-day operations of the television networks in terms of all the long-form content. So what you see on TV is what we schedule and we put together for your viewing pleasure. So we're the people that entertain everyone's kids, and you know, keep you busy while you're doing all the work at home. We keep the kids entertained.
Kennedy.
I guess we're all being very shy, so I'll go second. My name is Michael Diaz, also known as Juan Bago. I'm an independent producer. I pretty much got into all types of comedy. I've done parody videos, sketch comedy, podcasting. I've just had always a passion when it comes to doing comedy, more specifically Dominican comedy. And right now I'm just pretty much focusing on writing, trying to write TV stuff. I think we need more Dominicans on television. So that's currently, and besides growing my my inspired mustache that I saw my uncle have, so I'm trying to take advantage of quarantine and grow a mustache.
Juan.
I love the mustache.
Thank you.
It's a good mustache. Hi, everyone. I'm Eileen Salazar, like Eileen on the wall. Currently, I work at AJ Plus as an associate producer. Originally, I was on the studios team on a show called Eat This, which looked at the intersection of food and politics and society. But recently just got switched over to the daily news team. So I make those quick little 1 to 2 minute text on screen videos that you often see on Twitter or Instagram.
So, hi, Eileen.
I guess I'm last, right? I am actually Soto Paniawa. I am a TV writer. Right now I write on The Proud Family, Louder and Prouder on Disney Plus. And before that I wrote on Beat on Stars. And before that Fast and Furious Spy Racers on Netflix. So my job is I serve the vision of the showrunners. The showrunners like the CEO of the show. And the showrunner right now is Ralph Farquhar. He's the 6th Black executive producer ever. He was the showrunner in the original Proud Family, and he was one of the creators of Militia. So he's kind of a Hollywood giant. And so my job is to serve his vision. And so he comes in every day and he says, this is what we're doing. And my job is to pitch him ideas. So in the form of jokes, in the form of story, that hopefully make it into the script.
Thank you, Ashley. So we're gonna just jump right in it, right? Vamos al mambo. I think that the best way is to dig into the early beginnings, right? And I would really love to know what led each and every one of you to your current field and what has been your proudest moment thus far.
I was gonna say, do we want to go in an order or just, I can go first. So how did I get to where I am now was the question, right? Basically, I decided to major in journalism in college because I liked the creative aspect of it in the sense of layout designs and magazine layouts. But while I was in college, print was dying and digital media was taking over. So I naturally just did the pivot because if I wanted a job post college, I needed to know how to do video. Fortunately, I got my big name internship the summer before my senior year in college. And I made sure I put everything I had into that internship to get a job offer at the end of it. So at the end of it, I had a job offer, and then post-grad, things got confused because you know how media works. And so that team no longer existed. So I had to intern with them all over again. And then I ended up getting a job there. And then was there for about 1.5 years, 2 years, and then got to AJ Plus. But it was definitely a journey. It was hard because I never thought I was going to be a producer. I never thought I was going to do video. In my mind, I was going to work in a magazine and be making layouts and getting to do cool text. But I've been able to implement that passion into video. So I still get to do cool text and cool graphics, but in a video format.
Go ahead. I guess I could go next. My journey is a little weird because originally I was an engineering major, and as I was going through my course, and I got to physics, I took the class 3 times, and I kept failing and failing. And my professor told me that he could give me the answers, and I would still fail, and that I should change my career path. So I decided to jump into communications with a focus on production. In terms of going into production, it was a completely different world where I got a lot of backlash from my family, because in our families, in the Hispanic families, a lot of times when they want you to be successful, they want you to be a doctor or an engineer or something high level. And when they saw television, why do I want production of television? They were like, wait a minute, you're not pretty enough to be in front of the camera, you know? What options are there for you? And I was like, you know what? I don't know, but I'm gonna go and find out. And in college, I decided to jump on all types of internships. I went, didn't matter the type of internships, but I ended up doing internships at Rolling Stone magazine, at ESPN, at The Source, at Cherry Lane Music Publishing. And it was more about educating myself about the opportunities that were available to me. And when I was at ESPN, I was working for the ad sales department, and that was my last semester. I had done a lot of projects for the sales team, and they loved the work that I did. And they told me basically, we have no openings for you in this company, but what about research? And I was like, you know what? Whatever door opens for me, I'm gonna take it, and I'll figure my way into whatever I want once I'm in the industry. And I basically entered through research. And I worked in research. I started right from the ground floor with affiliate networks. In television, basically affiliate networks are networks that are associated with the big companies. So ABC, CBS, CW. I worked with all the different affiliates across the country. And from there, I found my way into Paramount Pictures, where I worked on syndicated shows like Frasier, Entertainment Tonight, The Insider. But one of the cool things is that in meetings, I was always very vocal with my ideas and my opinions. And they always knew that I had a passion for animation. And they were the ones that helped me transition to Nickelodeon, where I've been for the last 15 years. So my journey's jumped around a lot, but I think for me, it's always been about never saying no and always jumping every hurdle, no matter what is presented in my path.
Kennedy, since I went after you the first time, I'll go after you again. For me, I think since I've been doing a lot of independent content creating, I've always been the class clown. I've always been the office clown. And as time started to evolve, especially with the internet and social media, I started writing a lot of short stories, and I was getting a lot of feedback. And then I think it was a time when I went to the HBO New York International Latino Film Festival, where I was seeing short films and features done by Latinos. And it sparked something for me to be like, look, I think I can write a 15-minute short. I can write a 30-minute short. And luckily I had a friend of mine that really pushed me and was on top of me with deadlines. And I did my first feature, the story of Juan Bago, around 15 years ago. And I think that once I screened it, I saw peers, that my family was seeing that, and they saw that I completed a project independently. I think that was the push that I needed to continue the path. Doing content online and social media and all that sort of led me to wanting to be real curious about the back end and marketing and understanding how to team up and create different things. So throughout my whole career, I've been able to really be curious and not only just create content, but understand the platforms. And at the same time, you know, I started a sketch group called Room 28 because I felt like what was on television wasn't reflecting what I was making me laugh. So I created a sketch group around 12, 13 years ago. I did Bago and No, which was a parody group. So I've dabbed in every different type of content to get to a point where I knew that I wanted to write long form. I wanted to create different stuff that ultimately was funny. So I started a podcast a couple of years ago because I felt like there was a need of voice to push our peers and to talk to others. But ultimately, throughout my whole career, it's just been a thing where I felt that there was always been a lack of Latino comedy that I feel that I can relate to.
So my story is a little bit, it's not a linear path, and so I might take up a little space here. So I'm from El Paso, Texas. It's on the border of Ciudad Juárez, Chihuahua, Mexico, and my mom is from Juárez, and my dad is from Puerto Rico. He's Afro-Puerto Rican, and he was in the military and he was stationed there, but he also played congas in a salsa band on the side, and he was playing congas at a club in Juárez, and my mom was like, I'm gonna be a man. And so here we are 6 kids later. And to me, that story is sort of encompasses just my home life. And so to go from a Black and brown community to a PWI, I went to Amherst College in Massachusetts. It was a complete 180. Like I was in over my head. And it was a place that it was incredibly isolating. And once I graduated, I felt this sort of urgency to meet students, high school students who maybe wanted to go to an Ivy League type school, but it was an abstract idea. And I wanted them to feel like they could do it in a way that wasn't abstract. So it was something as simple as I became a high school teacher in Mississippi. It's the lowest performing state in the nation, one of the poorest states in the nation. And to me, it was this sort of idea that if they could just meet someone who did it, oh, Miss Soto did that, I could do that too. Like literally, and it was just very simple. And, but once I was a teacher, it's the most exhausting job in the world. My hat goes off to all the teachers because it's incredibly draining, and I was spread really thin. I was one person serving 300 students and could only do so much in terms of impact. And so my time in Mississippi became, you know, informed by like this sort of understanding that I wasn't doing the students justice in the way that I wanted because I was spread so thin. And that's just true of any teacher. They all feel like that. And quite frankly, it's the reality, especially if you're working in urban schools or underfunded schools, public schools, things like that. And so once I was also living in Mississippi and it's a hard place to live. And so it also was this sort of understanding that I wasn't going to lay down roots in Mississippi long term and I needed to leave. And my best friend from college, she lives in LA, and she's like, Ashley, come out here and figure it out. I was like, okay, I will meet you there. I like didn't even, I didn't have a plan. And I got here and I fell into marketing, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is perfect, because when you're doing marketing, you have so much more access to a larger audience. And so when I'm thinking about impact, remember I was talking about one person serving 300, I could now reach Black and brown communities on a larger scale. But once I worked in marketing, and I was working at like an influencer marketing agency, I learned that my job was to find the audience and push the brand message. I didn't get to control that brand message. And so my sort of idealized impression of what marketing would be like, which is where you could see yourself represented, you know, in a billboard, where ultimately it just becomes white noise and then Black and brown faces can be normalized, was very much shifted into like, I now have to find the audience that fits this demographic and then tell them to buy Tide. And so it wasn't, you know, it wasn't the avenue that I needed or that I was searching for. And so I kept asking, like, so who's controlling this narrative? And then finally, you know, I'm here in LA and it was just like, oh, writers. And going back to the sort of, going back to the idea that I had was just like, oh, if one of my students could see me do it and they wanted to go to a place like Amherst College, then they could feel like they could do it too. Like, oh, Miss Soto do that, I could do that too. Well, my boyfriend, he was writing a script and I saw his script, I was like, oh, I can do that too. So it's literally within your circle of influence, your sphere of influence, you just see what other people are doing and you start to, you know, gain interest. And it was just, it worked out that like my skill set met the sort of intention that I set out, which was to reach Black and Brown communities. And to me, TV is the greatest normalizer. At least in the United States, it doesn't discriminate against socioeconomic background because everyone has access to TV. And so my students in Mississippi have access to it, even if they don't necessarily have access to, you know, the world necessarily, they do have access to TV. And so I'm thinking about how that access reaches everyone from every socioeconomic background. And we have to be in a lot of meetings for Proud Family. And one of the meetings that we were in showed us data that Black and Brown kids from low income backgrounds in rural areas are watching TV more than any other demographic. So I'm literally writing for those kids.
Wow, thank you everyone. I think some of the intersections that I'm getting from everyone's story is that everyone saw certain missing gaps, right? Not feeling represented or feeling erased by certain topics, and understanding that media, journalism, TV, film, this is all programming, right? And when you're part of this, you can create space and rewrite things that are normally pushed aside, right? I think something else that I caught on to too is just that everyone really does have their own unique experience. I think that when it comes to these fields, it can be planned out, but it's also sporadic. Sometimes it's not something you plan at 18 or 21 and end up doing it at 30 and 40. And I think that's super dope and super important to point out. Something that Eileen and Kennedy pointed out was they've emphasized on the internship. And I think that a lot of college students, especially those that are attending right now, are very concerned or questioning how do they approach the internship, or how do they shine in an internship, right? Especially in such a very dominated space. And sometimes I feel like a lot of the big conversations that I have with college students is the struggle of internships, when sometimes they're not paid and they may not have the money or the privilege to do so. I'm curious to know how you navigated that space and how you took charge in it.
So in terms of internship, and this is funny because I'm a mentor to our current interns at Viacom. And what I tell them is that your internship in a lot of ways is an audition. It's a 10-week audition to make an impact, to make an impression. And more than that, it's an opportunity to network, because it's one of the few times before you enter the workplace where you have an opportunity to cement some relationships and create relationships which may help you long term. And I think that's one of the big things about internship. It's, yes, you get work experience, but a lot of times, and we can all probably speak to this, is it's not about the job. A lot of times it's about the person that you know and who's the connection. And if that person can help you get to that door, and then you got to walk through it. So having an internship, I think that that's one of the big things that you always got to take away from internships, is that you got to look at it as a 10-week audition. You got to go in there hungry. You got to be able to take on any and every project that you can. Ask a lot of questions. Don't be afraid to engage. And also do a lot of informational interviews, because it's one of the few opportunities that you have before you enter the workspace where you can get a better idea of what departments or what type of jobs are available to you. So the only way to do that is to inform yourself and talk to people, because that'll only help you as you finally enter the workplace and you start to try to navigate your career.
Agreed. I was actually like super anti-internship in college. I hated the thought of them because a lot of media internships are unpaid and you're working all these hours and then you're giving these companies all your really good ideas and you're getting no credit for it. And so I was really anti-internship, but I went to Howard University, which is a historically Black college and university, HBCU. And they really promote you need an internship, you need to get this, you need to do that. And I was like, all right, I have the skill set, And I'm applying for internships because I'm being told this is what I need to do, and I'm not getting any of these internships. So instead of letting that deter me, I was like, I have this skill set. Let's just start creating your own content. And so that's when I started blogging. That's when I started, taking pictures. That's when I started doing, that's when I did Tus Parceros, which was a web series highlighting 12 Afro-Latins on campus. Like, I just started, I was like, I know how to do these things, so I'm just gonna make my own content. I'm gonna have a website, I'm gonna have video content in some way, shape, or form, even though I don't necessarily know exactly how to make this look super nice, but I'm gonna have it, so when the opportunity does come, I have something to show for it, even though it's not attached to a well-known company. And so when in college, we had a 48-hour media trip to New York where we went to 12 different companies. And I wasn't originally gonna go, but one of my professors was like, Eileen, I put you on the list. You're coming. I don't want to hear no questions asked. And I saw that Complex was on the list and NBC Universal. So I was like, bet. I'm going in with the game plan. I'm Googling, they had told us who we were meeting with. So I made sure I knew background information, trying to find those little connector ties that I could bring up when I was speaking to these people, because I'm pretty introverted. So just going up to people and trying to start a conversation is not my strength. So I needed to know what I was going to be talking to them about, how could I wheeze my way in there. And so when we got to the Complex office, there was 3 people. 2 of them were on-air hosts, and 1 of them was actually the internship coordinator. And everyone went to the host automatically. Everyone was lining up for them too. And I was like, they're not the ones who can get us hired, guys. So I went straight to the internship coordinator. I was like, hi, I'm Eileen. I was like, every time, I submit my resume to things, I get compliments on it, but I never get an interview. What's up? Do you have any advice? And she was she told me to pull out my resume. She was like, oh, it is cute. It's really, I do graphics. So my resume at least it stood out from your traditional standard, resume. And she was like, oh, well, based off this, I don't know what you've done. Based off our conversation, I know your skill sets. She was like, you need to reword this. And then she was like, reword it and send it, and I got you. And that's how I got my internship, based off of a conversation and being able to really sell myself, because I had no video experience. The only video I had ever done was Tus Parceros, but I was able to sell it to her, tell her this is what I'm really passionate about. This is what I really want to do in life. And she gave me the shot. And so when I got the internship, I made sure that I took in every lesson that I could. That's how I learned how to edit in Premiere. That's how I learned how to set up a FS7 camera. That's how I learned how to set up shoots, how to run audio. I literally, when I say I had no video experience prior to my internship, that is I made sure I took in everything, because industry standard for digital media, I'm at one of the top media companies. We got to soak this in. And then fortunately they needed an org chart, and because I do graphics, I was the intern that they came to. And so I did it, and I did it to the best of my ability. And next thing you know, I'm sitting in the director of production's office because she needs some edits to it. I'm in her office for my whole internship shift. There we go. Internship shift of that day. And at the end of it, we're taking tequila shots together. So, I made sure that those 4 hours, I'm talking to her, I'm getting to know about her background and how she got into production. I'm just finagling any second that I have, because I had 2 weeks left and I hadn't gotten a job offer yet, and I'm going into my senior year of college. So even though I was anti-internship, I knew that I needed to get that experience somewhere or the other. So until I got my internship, I made sure that I was seeking out the information so I could present something.
I just wanted to jump in on one of the things that Eileen said regarding credits and being paid for internships. I think that one of the things is that a lot of interns, college kids want to be paid for internship, yes. Because a lot of times you're putting in that work and you want to be compensated. But I also feel that one of the problems with being paid was that when interns started getting paid, a lot of that compensation came out of departments' budget. And what happened was that a lot of these departments stopped hiring interns. And one of the things I feel that it hurt by not having both paid interns and credit interns, I think it hurt overall the amount of minority interns that can enter the workplace now. Because when you have to pay an intern, you're treating them now like a regular employee. So you're looking for the creme de la creme. And a lot of times that eliminates minority kids who need help or need the experience in order to develop the work experience to enter the workforce. So one of those things, I just wanted to throw that out there because I feel that, yes, everybody wants to be paid, but I think that what is more important in some cases is the experience, because that experience is going to pay you in the long run, and it's going to pay you over and over and over.
I just wanted to jump in real quick because for the last 3-4 years, I've been working with interns. And what I find as a common trait for interns that tend to grow quicker is that they have a long-term vision, and they understand that it's all about relationships. And they understand that at any time, especially when you're working with media, there's a lot of skill sets that hosts or individuals might not have. And if you're that person that can fill in and can assist, you create that value. And so you may not finish being with that team, but the beauty is that person can refer you. And so I think in this time right now, I'm just noticing that where there's individuals that feel like, here we are working together, but eventually I could be working for the intern. And so I think that there's a really strong thing that needs to be really stressed out is that how are you envisioning? How are you looking and you capitalizing in this moment? Because in 4, 5, 6 years, these relationships as an intern is what gets you through the future.
Agreed. I agree with what Kennedy said, but I also kind of counter to that just because my internship was in New York. New York ain't cheap. It's not a cheap place to live. And I was like living in the Bronx, subletting in a roach-infested apartment, and my rent was like $400, and the money I was making at my internship barely covered that. I used to have like 4 cents in my account and somehow made that stretch for 2 weeks. And so yes, the experience is important, but also being able to live and support your life is also important. So I feel like that comes down to these companies where they make it, livable and still let people gain that experience.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from. I'm from the Bronx, so I understand that very well.
Yeah.
But if you're hungry and you want that experience and you lack that experience, you got to make a move somehow in some way.
Yeah.
And you got to figure it out. Because for me, I was doing internships, but at the same time, I was holding down two full-time jobs on the side. Do 2 days at the internship and the other 5 days working at another job. So I get it. We should be paid, but sometimes companies try to figure out ways of kind of exploiting you and exploiting you for their benefits.
Yeah.
And once we started getting paid, it also eliminated a lot of intern positions and a lot of opportunities for other kids that may need it. And I think that's where my concern was, because where at Viacom at one point we had 1,000 interns every summer. Once we switched up to paying interns, we cut it down to 250 interns for a building with 56 floors and over 10,000 people. That's a loss that's 750 kids that are no longer experienced or getting that work experience that they need in order to better compete in the workplace.
Yeah.
So that was kind of my beef with it. But I understand, hey, we should be valued and we should be compensated for what we contribute.
Ashley, were you going to say something? I wasn't sure. No? Okay.
I can if you want, but I didn't do any internships, so I don't know if I can have this conversation.
I saw you moving. I wasn't sure, so I wanted to make sure first. But I think that everyone brought up really good points, and it plays into my next question, which is something a lot of people are curious about. And we want to know, what has been the most valuable to you? Has it been a traditional education in your field, or has it been experience? And when I mean experience, I mean non-internship, something that have happened either sporadically or through your network.
I can say for me, honestly, it's been 50-50, just because my old professors have been my plug to the 2 jobs that I've had post-college. Like, working at AJ Plus, my old professor was like, I was kind of ranting to him like, yo, I really want to quit my job. I need a new job. And he asked me where I wanted to go. And I said AJ Plus. And he was like, I actually just met somebody from there. He was like, here's their email. And I emailed them. And then, that spewed interview process and everything. But I will say that gaining experience, I feel like I don't have that much experience, especially for like, I feel like I've worked at 2 well-known companies in good positions, and I don't have that much experience in a sense, in the traditional sense. But I think being able to show like, hey, I have produced this, or hey, I have done this for another company, and creating content for my own stuff has been a leg up. So it at least shows them what I'm capable of. But I think my education definitely has played a large role in getting me to the places that I've been able to get to.
I think for me, it's been the opposite a little bit. For me, education didn't explain to me what the workplace was going to be like, or the dynamics, or the politics, or the skills, because a lot of times education is more top level, where they explain things to you. But once you're in the workspace, it's a completely different environment. And for me, a kid coming from the streets, a first generation going into the workforce, it was kind of a life of hard knocks, because I didn't know how to navigate that world. And if it wasn't for a mentor taking me under their wings and kind of taking me through the steps, I don't know if I would have stayed in the industry. For me, experience-wise, I also developed a lot of the skills in the workplace, where I learned how to edit and produce and write and market. So for me, it's always been more about the experience, because a lot of times that environment helps you evolve quickly, because it's also, the workplace is also kind of a jungle where you need to survive. And the only way to survive is always to adapt and evolve. And the way to do that is always to take on extra projects and go outside of your lane and do what other people don't think that you should do, or you take on every project because that's the only way you get the visibility. So that for me is where I lean towards more experience, because you learn something new in the workplace that a lot of times education doesn't teach you.
I agree. Especially when filmmaking and creating content, you can learn all the stuff, but like a lot of times you could be shooting something and it could be the weather's not agreeing, or you have somebody that calls out, and I think you really need to see how you react under stress or under certain circumstances that is not based on learning. And I think that for me, the experience has allowed me to improvise and to learn new styles that can allow you for the next project to apply. And so I think a lot of times it's great to have the knowledge, and the experience is the one that will get you to be able to really know yourself. Because you can learn the stuff, but a lot of times you have to figure out your style. And that comes with either it's writing or shooting or even editing. So I think that the experience there, especially if you're working with a deadline, there are things that you learn within yourself through the experience.
Yeah.
So if the question is experience versus education, meaning a degree versus experience, then you don't need a degree to become a writer. that said, like your life experience literally influences your point of view. So as an example, when I went to Amherst College, I studied neuroscience. It was a really isolating experience. It was very few, you know, people that looked and like me, I came from my background in that major. And so as a way to sort of compensate for that personally, I created a major. They didn't have a Latinx studies where I went. And so I created a major on how music creates cultural identity for Puerto Ricans in the United States. And there was a neighboring town, Holyoke, Massachusetts, that has the most densely populated Puerto Rican community in the United States. Obviously there's more numbers in New York, but by percentage there's more in Holyoke. And so I use that as a case study. And that's a lot of academic jargon to say I got to go and leave campus and go hang out with a bunch of Puerto Ricans and talk about music. And so that was because of my own personal experience, knowing that that was what I valued, and that informed my point of view in my education. And so as a writer, especially specific to TV writing, you're being hired to share your life experience, and sometimes that includes your education, that includes the way that you tell stories is informed by your life experience, and so my experience in education is going to influence those stories. But in terms of education, I would say that my education got me the meetings that I ultimately got in order to get hired, but it was the writing material that got me to sit at the table, and the writing material is informed by my life experience.
Amazing. Thank you, everyone. Now, what advice would you give to the person who may not have the network, may not have the degree, and does want to step into a current field, right? Whether it's in TV, film, writing, media, in terms of making themselves visible, making themselves, to find opportunities. What kind of advice would you give to that person?
Start creating your own content. Like, we live in a digital media, social media driven world, and there's so many softwares, apps, so many things for you to be able to get your story, your perspective, whatever type of content you want out there. So that would be my biggest one. Like, just start creating, even if it's not the best product, even if you're like, ooh, this looks crazy. If the heart and the basis and what you're trying to say is strong and is really good, people are going to listen, people are going to watch, people are going to read it. So that would be my number one thing, is just start creating. Just do it. No excuses. Just start it.
I agree. And I also think that we all have, I'm assuming we're all on social media. So creating content, sharing it with your friends, getting feedback from them, because a lot of times, when I'm creating content, even now, sort of have like a focus group of people that I trust that have different taste. And I think that when you get the feedback, because you're always going to have someone that finds everything funny, and they're going to have someone who doesn't find it funny, right? So if you're starting off, create your own content and put it out there on social media, because sometimes your friends retweet, or your friends sharing it on Facebook, their network now sees it and it might catch their eyes. So I think the beauty of what we're at now with social media is that, yes, you might have only 100 friends on Facebook, but if it's something that's being shared, now it's getting expanded, and constantly having feedback amongst people that you trust will allow to have that growth as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think the content is key in this day and age, where a lot of the stars for Nickelodeon, a lot of the stars that we're focusing on are people that are doing YouTube videos, self-made. And those are the ones that are garnering attention, because I think what is key at this moment is being creative. You don't need a big budget to create something to tell a great story. It's just a matter of what type of passion you put into it and how you tell that story. And it doesn't matter if you have, like Juan said, you can have 100 friends or 100 followers, but that retweet and that refollowing, that story gets out. And all it takes is one person in a key position to watch that video and connect with it. And then all of a sudden that door opens for you.
So if you want to break in as a writer, you need to have two scripts that you're proud of. And how do you know that you should be proud of them? You've submitted them for competitions. You've gotten and you've placed. You've gotten finalists and you've won. You've used those scripts to get into fellowships. You've gotten into fellowships, or you've gotten representation with your samples to get a manager and agent. I say all that to say is that your scripts will be your calling card, and people will call you. And that's ultimately how it works in terms of trying to become a staffed writer on a TV show. And so as you're trying to navigate that, to gain that network, you can take classes. You don't need a degree, but you can still take a writing class so that you can learn the structure and the format. But when you're doing that, now you're going to build a community with the other students who are both in the same boat as you. So that's your community, and then you network with a working TV writer, and that is your TV. That is building your network. And so, and my manager that I have I got it through a writing teacher that I had. I did take a class at the writing pad. And he was my writing teacher. He wrote The Wedding Planner with J-Lo. And I separately, I also got into the National Hispanic Media Coalition's TV Writers Program. And through that program, they send out, people know about you. And so a literary manager reached out to me, and he wanted my material. And I saw that he was Facebook friends with that writing teacher. And so I reached out to him. I was like, hi, I see you're Facebook friends with so-and-so. Would you mind putting in a good word for me? And he was like, oh, you can do better. I was like, oh, okay. Well, I'm also talking to this other company. What do you think? And he's like, oh, no, you can do better. Send me your stuff. And then he ended up sending it to the guy who sold Mad Men, who is now my manager. And so all that to say is that your content will speak for itself and people will come to you. And then I don't know if we're all grown. You don't know who fucks with you until you do, because I didn't know. I was just like, hey, I see that you're Facebook friends with so-and-so. And he's like, oh, I got you. I got you. And I didn't know that he would go to bat for me that hard until I asked. So one thing, Zanaranda, she's a director and a showrunner she's directed on Room 104 and a bunch of things. And one piece of advice that she gave me, and that she says in everything that she speaks on, is that there is no door, you're the door. And so you just have to sort of take ownership of that and use that to navigate the industry. And when I say there's no door, you're the door, the first TV writer that I ever met, I chased her in a parking lot because somebody told me I need to chase my dreams. It could have gone really poorly and it could have gone really well. And I was so fortunate that she was so nice, and she's like, here's my card, take it. And that was years ago, and fast forward, she's the one who recommended me for Proud Family.
Yes. So everything just said, right? These three things keep floating in my mind, which is the power of networking, making sure you're sending out these emails, reaching out to people, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram DMs, all of that. And there is a strategy in this. There is kind of an art in strategizing and meeting people in order to get somewhere, right? Because I think one of the biggest topics, one of the things that we keep emphasizing is sometimes it really is who you know that can get your foot in the door or can get you a spot somewhere. I think I really want to touch on representation right now, especially considering that was one of the biggest motivators in stepping into your industries. I think something that we don't talk about enough is sometimes the pressure of making sure you are representing everyone, especially when we're talking about the Latino community, which is a huge community in terms of trying to represent. It's really hard to represent 20 plus countries in a single narrative. And I'm curious to know what has been your experience navigating your current spaces in trying to fulfill representation.
I think for me, for a long time when I was the only Latino on my team, and I assimilated for such a long time that I felt like I was losing my identity. And if it wasn't for me joining the employee resource groups, I think that I would have completely lost who I was. I think that one of the cool things about being in the workplace is that companies have what are called employee resource groups, which are basically groups, they're minority focused groups where they're support systems for African Americans, LGBTQ, Latinos, and different, you have one for war veterans, for parents. And basically what they are just support systems. And it's also a safe zone when you're in the workplace, because a lot of times, you're working this 9 to 5, but you're also playing a role. You're playing a game, and you're not allowed to be yourself. You're not allowed to bring your personality and your layers and all this energy, because a lot of times we have to become muted and kind of play a role, because we have to make someone else feel comfortable as opposed to them being comfortable with you. And for me, I ended up joining that ERG groups. And what we try to do as a part of the ERG is that we try to bridge the gap between the minorities and upper management, because let's be honest, senior management at most companies is pretty much all white. And if it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense. So for us, it was more about educating them on the importance of Latinos as a consumer and as a viewer and as a customer, because no matter how you look at it now, we're becoming the majority in a way. There's 20 million of us. Our buying power is $1.7 trillion. We have power. We just haven't figured out how to use it and how to implement it across society. So it's more about us. How do we change those opinions and make them take us seriously and make them listen to us and make them come to the table and have an honest conversation? Because a lot of times, even with the Black Lives Matters movement, if it wasn't for a lot of people protesting and jumping up and making noise, what these companies have made the moves that they made, it was because people was putting that pressure on them. And I think that we have to put that pressure on them as well. But we are not yet unified on that level, because like you said, we're so diverse in terms of our cultures that we can't get our stuff together in order to make that strategic move. So those are some of the things that I'm focusing on as part of the ERGs and as a representative at Viacom and at Nickelodeon. Because a lot of times, we're not a lot, but we have to take that challenge upon ourselves, because we have to open that doors for those that follow us.
This is a tricky question, because oftentimes, I look the way I look. I have beautiful fro, brown, oftentimes when I am in Latin spaces and Latin rooms, I am not acknowledged as Latina, And oftentimes when people are like, Salazar, why is everyone decides to question. Salazar, how are you Salazar? Everyone, once I explain, they're like, oh, so just your dad's Colombian. And I'm like, no, both my parents are from Buenaventura, Colombia. Most of my family is still in Colombia. I think I have about 9 relatives on my mom's side in America. And it is frustrating, because it's very frustrating, because it's frustrating and it's annoying constantly having to explain my identity and my upbringing and my culture. But I feel like the time is now. The time has always been now. But I think people are more willing to have these conversations. But it starts within our Latin community, because we all know the Latin community has its own issues with racism as well, and being able to split what race and ethnicity and are, like I identify as Afro-Latina, but me saying I'm Afro-Latina is saying that I am a Black woman with Latin roots. Like culturally, I grew up very Latin in my household. I knew it was cleaning day because Mark Anthony was playing, but I'm a Black woman. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. And so I think we have to start the conversation within the Latin community first and be able to acknowledge, like, hey guys, yes, you may be from this certain country, but you know, it does get a little complicated within the Latin, you know, race does get a little complicated in the Latin community as well. But it's like, just because I have darker skin doesn't mean that I'm lesser than.
Jump in real quick. I mean, I've been involved in meetings where, you know, generalizing that, you know, a Dominican is like Mexican or Ecuadorian, and sometimes it's complex for people that are not involved in the Latin in the space to understand that there are differences and nuances. And I think that sometimes our responsibility when you're representing is to educate and also let them know not to be as lazy, to do your homework, to understand that we are very complex, and that, you know, sometimes trying to create content is generalized will not be specific to the audience. And so it's really, really important to know the difference. And I think that sometimes that tends to happen in meetings when maybe a script is presented or a campaign, and it's like, you got to put your foot down and say, look, I understand Latino is a blanket, but there's very specific things. And at the end of the day with social media, if you put something out and it's not specific there, you're going to get called out and you're going to be tone deaf. So I think it's really important as a person that's in there to really put your foot down and really have individuals to understand that we are complex and that do your homework and be specific at times.
Yeah, I think, I mean, my entire job is literally about representation and making sure that we get it right. But with it, is this recorded? Is this going to be distributed? Like, can I speak freely, or is this, it's going to be on the internet somewhere? This is going to determine what I say.
Angel, what's going to happen with the recording? Vanessa?
So we're going to send it out to everyone that RSVP'd today, which was about 200 people. So speak freely. Speak however you feel.
But it's not going to be like on social media.
No.
That like press could hear.
No.
Okay, great. Yeah, so okay. I mean, the reason I say this is because, as you know, I'm in a room with it's all Black writers room technically. Like, and my dad is Afro-Puerto Rican, so by default, I am included in that. And so, but even then, I'm still the only Latina in the room. And so I come from a background where my mother's Mexican, my dad's from Puerto Rico, he's from the Caribbean, the mainland are very different, the languages are different, the dialects, like when I, like the different the words that are used are different, the accents are different, like all those things are very different. And then you add on the Black identity, which, that adds another layer. So I come with that sort of experience, and that's an asset to the room. But because people don't know, they don't know all those nuances, and so I'm literally, my job is I'm the representative in the room, and so I have to be really sort of diligent about how I present the narratives that I present. And so to me, the most important people for my job are journalists and musicians who are putting out that content, because I can say, something specific to, I don't know, something, this isn't it, I'm just gonna use this as an example, but like a chancla, like how am I gonna explain what a chancla is to a group of people who've never heard that term, let alone understand what it means within the community? And so I have to do a lot of educating in the room. And so what I've done is I will email the showrunner, and it's more work for me. It is, that additional labor that maybe other people don't necessarily have to do. So I will literally do the research, and I'll be like, here, like I have a pitch for this storyline, and here's what it is that I'm going to, this is what it is, but here's all the data essentially to back it up. So I'll send statistics, I'll send all the articles from different, from New York Times, NPR, Hip Latina, People en Español, Remezcla, all those things. And so everyone in the ecosystem is contributing indirectly and directly to the show, because you're literally giving me the sort of the justification for this pitch. Because it's one thing for me to say this is what we do, and then it's another to be like, this is what we do and you should put it on this TV show. And so I literally prepared documents of like, this is like literally a single word will literally, you know, be an entire document of research, so that they know that like, I'm not just pulling shit out of my ass. This isn't just me trying to pitch something because I think it's funny. It's like, no, this is something that is a lived experience in the community, and here's the research to back it up.
Thank you, everyone. And something that I have to highlight off of the conversation that we just had is how complex Latinidad is and how we are still unpacking a lot of it. Eileen broke it down perfectly. You know, there's a lot of differences in religion, in race, in dialects, even geographically. Dominicans and Puerto Ricans, we have more in common with Jamaicans. The only difference is the language. But because we all speak the same language, which is Spanish, we're all lumped together. And I think that's where it does get complex, and we are still figuring out our way. And I think that, again, these fields are programming, and to see people actively educating themselves and others at the same time is super dope. So thank you all for obviously teaching through your experience, but also the knowledge that y'all have. I do want to also ask, I know we kind of spoke about it already, but your certain platforms or your roles in these certain spaces, when you do have a seat in the table, how are you actively bringing up these conversations or using your voice to speak about some of the topics that we normally don't talk about, like racism in the community, or like, you know, just certain topics that we normally don't talk about, if you do? So let me know.
I guess I could start this one off because I dealt with this personally last year. So last year, Viacom and HBO had teamed up together, and we wanted to have a conversation regarding immigration. And one of the tough parts was trying to get approval to have this panel discussion and live podcast. And just, you know, the whole idea was about, you know, immigrants are being treated as the enemy, as something that does not belong in this country, when they are the ones that built this country from the ground up. And we wanted to have, you know, kind of inform as to who these immigrants are and the faces and their points. And the funny thing is that, you know, for us Latinos, that's important, because my mom was an immigrant and she brought me here, and I became an American citizen. And I'm the one that's contributing now. You know, a lot of times when immigrants come here, you don't see the impact or the contributions back to society and to the industry until the second generation, because we're the ones that have assimilated and we know how to navigate these waters a little more. But the battles that I encountered was that a lot of times companies, they like to stay neutral. They don't like to take a stance in one way or the other. Because for them, money is king. And if, let's say, they decide to go pro-immigrant, then all of a sudden there's going to be a loud roar from the other side saying, wait a minute, what are you doing? So for me, getting approval to have this panel discussion it didn't happen. I had to go outside the company, go independent, just to have this discussion, just to try to bring more awareness. And you know, basically let everyone know how important it was to educate. But a lot of times when you're in the corporate world, it's very hard for them to move because they're not informed. And sometimes they don't want to be informed, because unless somebody, like Ashley said, Ashley has to go to them and inform them and educate them. And once they're educated, sometimes they'll make that move and take those steps. But that's not always the case, because some people just don't care. Just keeping it 100.
I would say professionally, I've been fortunate enough to work in predominantly Black and Latin spaces. So I haven't had to have those hard conversations. And I'm kind of grateful for that. I've been able to work around people who have shared my experiences and stuff. On a personal level, oftentimes, like I said, I'm having to explain my Afro-Latinness and more in the sense of explaining how Blackness is not just an American thing, but it's, you know, a Colombian thing. It is a Dominican thing. It's an African diaspora thing. So any chance I get, I'm breaking it down on social media. I'm explaining like, hey guys, this happened, you know, the ship went this way, it landed here, it went but I find like, I originally used to get really annoyed having to have these conversations all the time, but now I'm really comfortable having them and I love having them, and I'm going to always be like, I'm always going to call it out and start the conversation if I have to. And I love when my friends or followers and peers, they see an article about Afro-Latinness or like the Black history of bachata, and they're like, oh, I saw this, it made me think of you, or oh, I thought this was a really interesting article, I read it and I thought about you. So those moments of seeing people that I know actually taking out the time to learn this information and understand what Afro-Latinness is sparks some joy.
Amazing, thank you guys. So I'm gonna start with these specific questions, and I'm gonna start with Juan. I wanted to ask you a little bit more about your journey because you have you worked in nonprofit for a while, and I kind of wanted to know more about your experience because while you were working in nonprofit, you were also diving into comedy. So I want to know that turning point where you pivoted to comedy as a whole, and what made you make that decision.
Well, I think that a lot of times I've read somewhere that a lot of entrepreneurs come from the nonprofit sector. And I think that for me, it was constantly, while I even was working, creating content and stuff. But I think it wasn't to a point where I knew I had enough experience and context. I mean, we really were talking prior as far as the network and context. And I think it was a point where you have to take that dive and take that risk to really apply yourself. But I think it's just once I felt that I had enough experience to dive into that. I think it's really important, you know, take risks, but at the same time, you know, especially in times that we're at where you have to sort of be calculative of it. But yeah, for me, I think it was a thing when I knew I had enough experience in my network to dive into it.
Thank you. Now, Ashley, you spoke a bit about your journey as a writer, and you emphasize on the fact that when you are a writer, you are writing through your experiences and your life. And I'm curious to know what have been some of the examples that you kind of could tell us about your experience as a Mexican, Boricua, growing up here in the States.
Can you rephrase that? What's the question?
So pretty much any examples of just your writing in terms of your experience in your life. You mentioned earlier that when you are a writer, you're speaking and you're writing through like your experiences.
So how do how does my experience inform my writing? Oh, okay. Yeah, so yeah, I'll just tell you about like the sample that's gotten me all my jobs. It's called Sellout. It's about an ethnically ambiguous marketing professional who sells out in order to secure quality healthcare for a schizophrenic mother. And I grew up around a lot of mental illness. My grandma had schizophrenia. She had 17 kids, and some of those had mental illness. So I just grew up around a lot of it. And then adding the identity aspect into it, there's the assimilation, the passing, the colorism, about all of in terms of identity and like being just a child of or the first generation kid. And I also sort of juxtapose that with like James Baldwin said that to be Black in America is to be schizophrenic because your reality is different from the the narrative that's been presented to you. So you keep looking like, this isn't like, am I crazy? Who's crazy here? And so I wrote a narrative that was literally my life of like someone who is constantly having to navigate spaces based on someone's perceived what they perceive me to be in terms of ethnicity and race, and then how that shifts my access into spaces, and then how I use that. And so like it's and using the schizophrenia as the through line, because it's like you have someone with a very real lived experience of like having hallucinations, so a reality that only she can see, with and juxtaposing that with the reality of just being a person of color living in America, where like the reality that you live is different from the story that you've been told about the American dream. And all of that is based on, it's not autobiographical necessarily, but it's all from my point of view of having grown up in that space.
Wow, amazing. Thank you. Eileen, I wanted to ask you about your time at Howard when you created Tus Parceros. Can you tell us a little bit about your web series and how it impacted your journey?
Yeah, so I created Tus Parceros, which honestly, the quality of it, looking back at it, I hate it, but that is probably one of my proudest and like favorite things I've ever produced, just because of like the content, like what it represented. So basically the web series was highlighting 12 Afro-Latin people around campus. Some were Cuban, some were Honduran. I was in it, Puerto Rican. Like we just had a modge podge of any Afro-Latino that I could find on campus. And the way it was set up was basically just like a green screen, and I threw out topics to people like crazy mom sayings, or like crazy traditions, your favorite food growing up. And what inspired me to do that was, again, I really wanted a way to highlight what it's like growing up Afro-Latin, because we do occupy two spaces. We occupy being Black, but we also occupy being Latin. And oftentimes those two worlds do merge, and there's a lot more similarities between the two identities than there are differences. And so with that, I just cut them up to like 4 quick 10-minute episodes, and I just put them out on Instagram and YouTube at the time. And growing up for me, I didn't realize that some of my experiences were different until I got to college. And like I said, I went to an HBCU, so it's nothing but like Black people, but that in itself is so complex, because just being from Texas, I'm from Houston, so being from Texas, I grew up around a lot of Colombians. I grew up around a lot of Mexicans, but someone who grew up in New York grew up around a lot of Puerto Ricans and a lot of Dominicans. And so that was just that was my effort at trying to give a voice to what I know. And I'm really proud of it. And that piece, like I said, was the first video piece of content that I ever created. And it got me my big name internship, and it's led me to where I am now. So, and it started a conversation, which was the most important part, that it started a conversation between the people who watched it.
Thank you, beautiful. Kennedy, I feel like you've mentioned so much about what I'm going to ask you, because you emphasize so much on your role in corporate, as well as just speaking on topics that a lot of people don't pay attention to. But I do want to ask again, is there a specific memory that you may have where through your knowledge or observation, you emphasized or led a conversation relating to the community, whether it's Latinidad or Blackness in America, whether it's for a project or a meeting?
So I would say the newest one would be for a show on Nickelodeon called Casa Grandes. It's about a Mexican-American family and their experiences. When they were creating the show, they had created the trailers, the hard drives, and what they did, which I thought was very infuriating in a way, was that they created a white English script and just translated it into Spanish and thought that that would make it sound authentic and that it would connect with the viewer in a real way. And one of the best things I think that happened was that they reached out to us to look at that promo, and we told them, what is this? This is not real. This is not authentic to the Mexican people. How do you have the voiceover sound American when you're talking about a Mexican family? You have to grab a Mexican actor or a Latino actor and have that person talk to the audience. The other thing that I think that we had to educate them on is that one size does not fit all, because we are so diverse in terms of different cultures that you have to create promos based on a regional approach. Like Eileen said, down south, there's a lot of Colombians and Mexicans. In New York, you have Dominicans and Puerto Ricans. You can tweak your language to try to talk to that audience and to connect with them, because that's the way that you're going to build that relationship. And I think that we were able to successfully do it, but there is still more work to be done, because while the show has been successful, we still haven't connected in an authentic way. And it's because we're not talking about the things that unite us. For a lot of us, music is a uniting force for us. La comida que nosotros comimos, how we call the same thing, different things, franfura, salchichas, it's kind of elaborating on the things that differentiate us, but also unite us. And I think that that's one of the things that we're trying to craft and work on in season 2, which is, let's go more into the culture. Let's look at what separates us, but also what unites us. Because sometimes when you make a cartoon, the most successful cartoons are always the ones that are able to connect with an audience. And in order to connect with a Latino audience, you got to talk about things that are relevant to them. For us, a lot of people find it weird when a Dominican, for breakfast, they eat a café con leche and una tostada. That's normal for me. Somebody looks at me and they think I'm crazy. And I'm like, nah, that's how I was raised. But it's one of those things that's a story that can be told. That's a story that can be angled in a creative way. And that's something that's unique that we can kind of celebrate, or how we make tamales or empanadas, like, some people call it patalitos, but we make it of harina, all these different ways, but it's the same thing. So those are some of the things that in my world we're trying to tackle. It's trying to make a more authentic connection with the viewer, because a lot of times you have to be in the writer's room in order to educate. And that's what I think we're lacking at the moment. And I'm happy that we're trying to make efforts where Viacom right now is requiring at least 40% there has to be at least 40% minority in each writer's room. And I think in having that, you will have more authentic representation, and it doesn't have to always fall on one person, because a lot of times, every time there was something in Spanish, they would be coming to one of us and be like, hey, does this sound right? Is this written the right way? And we're like, no, dude, we have to speak a little differently. You can't just do a translation verbatim. You have to talk to us in an authentic way. So I think that now those are some of the conversations that we're having, but we still got a long way to go.
Thank you. Before we move on, I'm gonna touch on 4 questions that attendees have, but is there anything that I didn't ask, but one of you feel that is very important that you guys wanna talk about or share with the attendees?
I would say just support each other in whatever endeavors. We are better united than alone. In the workplace, that's been probably my biggest saving grace, is that I've been able to rely on coworkers that are very similar minded, they're allies, and they have your back. And I think that that also helps you and elevate and feel comfortable in pursuing your goals and taking those chances. Because if you know somebody's got your back, then you're more willing to take that risk and take that leap.
Thank you. No other comments? We're all good? We're all good. Okay, cool. So I'm gonna start with the first question. So this one's from Lisa. And her question is, what programming is being developed or shooting, highlighting the Spanish-speaking communities in the US and outside the country? We need more shows like Taco Chronicles, Gentified, and the 2 reality shows that took place in Mexico City that only aired for 1 season, Made in Mexico and Mexican Dynasty. Do any of y'all have any comments on that?
We're working on it. It's slow going, but we're working on it. I think that we have to find that balance between telling a Hispanic story and reaching a mainstream audience. And I think that's one of the hardest things, because a lot of times when you make a show, you want to build a show for the biggest audience possible. But a lot of times what happens is you attract a niche audience. And I think that companies and networks have to become more comfortable when you create a show for an Asian American or Black or Hispanic audience, that you're going to get a smaller audience, but a much more devoted audience. And I think that Netflix has kind of opened that door in that regard, because sometimes when they cancel shows, a lot of people come up and protest, like, why are you canceling? This is a story that's talking about our culture. And that is a conversation that is starting to happen more and more in television. And I think it's a conversation that needs to continue.
Thank you. Anyone else want to add on that? No? Okay. So the next one is by Larissa. Her question is, how are you shaping the culture influencing at your companies? How can more people show up for the Afrolatinx community?
I guess I'll take this one. To show up, just, learn. You have to learn, and you also have to unlearn certain things that you may have heard growing up. It's a process, but if you're willing to be open and acknowledge the faults, it's definitely possible. But also, there's just, there's certain things you just shouldn't say or do. It's the same way, just think of the things that you hate people saying to you for being a Latina. Just think about that as well. But definitely be willing to unlearn certain things and be open to learning new things and actually listening to what people have to say, other Afro-Latino people have to say, because it's not all in our head. This is what we're experiencing.
Thank you. The next question is by Matt. He said, oh, I lost it. I'm sorry, my screen just popped out. So the question is pretty much, what's the experience like working with music in your field? I'm not sure if we dove into that section yet, but pretty much your experience in terms of implementing music styles or the influence in music.
I can answer that. So every show is different, but it's a combination of several things. So when you're in the writer's room, if there's a certain song that you want to pitch, you pitch it out. So it's, it's up to each writer to have the sort of, it's coming from their own sphere of knowledge. And so each writer is responsible for staying up on the music, you know what I mean? But then that also is in concert with what, again, as I said at the beginning, was that my job is to serve the showrunner's vision. And so I know for a show like Proud Family, which is such a legacy show, which is really exciting, but we also have some really big heavy hitters. So as much as I will try to pitch someone who's maybe a little bit more unknown, they let me know that that's not that, they're not putting people on. They're finding people who are already on because of the nature of the show that it is. And so I have to keep those things in mind. And in addition to that, we Ralph Farquhar is a longtime collaborator who does all our music. And so anytime we have to if there's like lyrics for a song that needs to be created or music, anything else, it goes directly to them. Maybe in the script we may write the chorus, but then they incorporate that into the full song, the lyrics for the entire song, and they add the music to it. So unfortunately, we don't really get to be a part of that creative process beyond whatever's on the script. We had our co-EP wanted us to be a little bit more involved, but at the end of the day, we make suggestions and then Ralph makes the decisions.
Got it. Anyone else wants to add to that?
Yeah, working at Complex, the Latin ERG, we really try to push for more Latin art. It's a music channel, so we really try to push for more Latin artists in any way, shape, or form. Someone who I did work with, he was really, really diligent at least getting Latin artists into the office for even just for listening sessions or being able to premiere a new music video or something like that. So, but like Ashley said, companies want the heavy hitter, big names, mainstream reach. So even though we may love this song and these smaller artists and they have a large Latin fan base, if the American, I guess for lack of a better word, fan base is not aware of who they are, if it's not a Bad Bunny or J Balvin, no one unfortunately wants to hear the song.
And sometimes even if it is Bad Bunny and J Balvin, they'll be like, ah.
Yeah, so it's hard to try to get these companies to be like, okay, because half the time they don't know what the song is saying anyway, so it's hard.
Thank you. Is there anything else maybe Juan or Kennedy would want to add to that, or we're good?
For us, I think that we have a Nick Music, and we've been incorporating more Latinos into our channel with music videos. I think that we can always do a better job in terms of including more than just the mainstream, because a lot of times it'll be like a J Balvin or a Bad Bunny, but there's a lot of up and coming artists that we can also put a spotlight on. But a lot of times it's kind of hard because it's all based on a lot of times on record label relationships and what artists they're pushing at the moment. And I think that sometimes we need to get away from that and start pushing more independent artists that can have a spotlight or who are just as creative. So that's something that we've had discussions, but that's a slow going at this moment.
Real quick, as creating content, you need music. And I think sometimes it's a great opportunity to work with some up and coming artists that is able to kind of fill in the mood that you're looking for, but at the same time, again, we're all on the same path of getting exposure and having an opportunity for a new audience. So a lot of times, I'll look and I'll see if there's some music that I like and artists that I like, and I keep that in my mind for if I'm doing a sketch or a video to work with them, to collaborate with them.
Dope. And it is getting back, we're past our time. We actually had to wrap up, but before we do, I do want to give space for each and one of you to either plug in a side project or side hustle or a page that you might want people to follow you on. So.
Go ahead and follow me on Instagram, y'all. At Eileen_Yvette with an I. And I also just want to kind of leave off with a piece of advice, which is just, trust your process, trust your path, and don't compare where you are in life to other people.
Love that.
Follow me on Juan Bago, and I'm on the fence of creating a Instagram for my mustache. It'd probably be Juan Bago mustache. But just follow me on Juan Bago on all the platforms. And my word of advice too is that, you know, make sure that when you're networking that you're not trying to meet as many people, but create quality relationships, because you can have 3 people to go to, and if that bond is stronger than all others, it's really important. Because I think a lot of times we go out there and we network and we know somebody that's a VP of this and that, but I think the key really comes down to long-term relationships. And so I think that it's really important when you network is to really have that opportunity to build strong relationships.
Amazing.
Well said, Juan. For me, I would say just if you have any questions, just reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty good at responding back. My word of advice is keep grinding. Don't let anything get in your way. If you have a goal, go for it. You can, I'll be honest, a lot of times I always say, use me as a plug. I've been in the business 18 years and I am willing to extend whatever experience and contacts I have. And I have no issues doing that, because when you elevate us all.
Dope.
My Instagram is at SoToSpeak8, the number 8. So Soto, like my last name, so to speak, 8. And whatever it is that you're doing, keep doing it. Especially if you're a journalist in here, please keep doing what you're doing. Like, there's nothing too, you know, specific in the community to write about, because you're literally helping the TV writers do their jobs. Because we spend a lot of time watching videos and reading articles and listening to different music, and that literally influences the decisions that my boss makes. And so if I don't have an article to share, sometimes that specific, you know, that culturally specific, you know, pitch may not land in the script, because he's like, oh, that's just an Ashley thing. But when you legitimize it with an article, you are literally, you know, you're a part of the ecosystem, and it helps me do my job. So, you know, keep doing what you're doing, because it's not going unseen.
Yes. Well, thank you, Kennedy, Juan, Ashley, Eileen. Good luck on any current or future projects. We are so grateful to have you all here. Thank you for giving us your time, dropping the gems that you did today. And yes, thank you to the participants too for tuning in.
Wait, before everyone leaves, thank you so much for your time. Our social media manager is going to get a picture of ya.
Oh.
So, all right, Caitlin, whenever you're. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
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 Have a good night.